There is a quiet belief that holds millions of people back. It sounds harmless, almost honest. People say, "I'm just not that intelligent. I've never been good at learning. Some people are naturally smart, I'm just not one of them." After repeating those words for years, they stop questioning them. The belief becomes part of their identity, and strangely, it brings comfort. Because if intelligence is something you either receive at birth or never receive at all, then there is nothing left to do. There is no reason to struggle with difficult ideas. No reason to challenge your own thinking. No reason to grow. You simply accept your limits and call them reality. But what if that belief is the greatest misunderstanding about the human mind? What if intelligence is not a gift that a fortunate few receive, but a habit that anyone can build? For centuries, people have treated intelligence as though it were a number, something measured by tests, compared in classrooms, or decided by genetics. Yet many of history's greatest thinkers saw it very differently. They believed intelligence was not something you possessed, it was something you practiced. A way of approaching the world. A willingness to think carefully instead of reacting quickly. To question instead of assuming. To understand instead of merely remembering. For thousands of years, philosophers have wrestled with a question that still matters today. What makes a human being truly excellent? Not successful. Not wealthy. Not famous. Excellent. More than 2,000 years ago, Aristotle offered an answer that still feels surprisingly modern. He used the word eudaimonia. People often translate it as happiness. But happiness is too small a word. A better meaning is human flourishing. It describes becoming everything you are capable of becoming. Reaching your highest potential as a human being. And according to Aristotle, the thing that separates human beings from every other creature is not physical strength. It isn't speed, it isn't beauty. It is our ability to reason, to think beyond instinct, to question ourselves, to understand cause and effect, to imagine the future, to search for truth, instead of simply reacting to the world around us. That means living well isn't simply about feeling good, it is about learning to think well. Notice what Aristotle did not say. He didn't say that only gifted people could achieve this. He didn't divide humanity into the naturally intelligent and the permanently ordinary. Instead, he believed that reason had to be cultivated. Like a garden. Left alone, a garden fills with weeds. A neglected mind does the same. Clear thinking doesn't happen automatically. It must be practiced. Every single day. This is where many people misunderstand intelligence. They imagine it as the ability to remember facts, to solve equations quickly, to speak with complicated words. Those things can be useful. But they are not the same as wisdom. Real intelligence is quieter than that. It appears when someone is willing to sit with a difficult question instead of rushing toward the easiest answer. It appears when someone says, "Maybe I'm wrong." It appears when someone changes their mind because the evidence deserves it. That isn't weakness. It is one of the greatest strengths a human being can possess. Yet this kind of thinking is becoming increasingly rare. Not because people have become less capable, but because they have become more distracted. Every day, thousands of voices compete for your attention. Notifications interrupt your thoughts before they have time to grow. Algorithms reward quick reactions instead of careful reflection. Entire platforms are designed to keep you moving from one piece of information to the next without ever stopping long enough to understand any of it. You begin reading. Then a message appears, you open it. Another video starts, another headline demands attention. Another opinion arrives before you've had the chance to examine the previous one. Slowly, without realizing it, your mind learns a dangerous habit. It becomes excellent at consuming information, and terrible at thinking about it. Deep thought cannot survive constant interruption. It needs silence, it needs patience, it needs time, and perhaps that is why genuine intelligence has become so rare. Not because brilliant minds no longer exist, but because uninterrupted minds are becoming harder to find. Yet, if distraction is one enemy of intelligence, there is another that is even more dangerous. It is certainty. Not certainty built on careful investigation, but certainty that arrives before investigation has even begun. The German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer once observed that every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world. In simple words, we often mistake what we know for all that can be known. That is the invisible prison of ignorance. It doesn't feel like a prison because you cannot see its walls. Think about a child who believes the entire world exists only inside their hometown. They are not lying. They simply haven't seen anything beyond it. Adults often make the same mistake with ideas. We assume our experiences represent reality itself. We believe our opinions are objective. We mistake familiarity for truth. And because of that, we stop asking questions. Schopenhauer believed this was one of humanity's greatest weaknesses. The less someone knows, the more complete their understanding often feels. The more someone learns, the more they realize how much remains unknown. That is why genuine intelligence rarely sounds arrogant. It sounds curious. Have you ever noticed that the wisest people usually ask the most questions? Meanwhile, those who know the least often speak with absolute certainty. This isn't simply a philosophical observation. Modern psychology has found something remarkably similar. Researchers have repeatedly shown that people with limited knowledge in a subject often overestimate their understanding, while experts tend to be more cautious because they are aware of the complexity they cannot yet explain. In other words, intelligence doesn't always increase confidence. Sometimes it increases humility, and humility changes the way you respond when your beliefs are challenged. Imagine two people reading an article that completely contradicts something they have believed for years. The first person immediately dismisses it. That's nonsense. They're biased. I already know the truth. The conversation ends before it even begins. The second person reacts differently. They pause. Not because they automatically agree, but because they are willing to investigate. They ask themselves, what if I've missed something? What evidence supports this? What evidence challenges it? That single moment of hesitation is incredibly powerful. Because intelligence often begins with the courage to delay judgment. Your brain, however, does not naturally enjoy doing this. From an evolutionary perspective, the human mind prefers certainty. Quick decisions helped our ancestors survive. If a rustle in the bushes might be a predator, it was safer to react immediately than spend several minutes analyzing the evidence. That instinct still exists today. Except now, instead of reacting to wild animals, we react to headlines, opinions, comments, social media posts. We judge before we understand. We defend beliefs before examining them. Our minds seek comfort long before they seek truth. This is why genuinely intelligent people often appear slower. Not because they think less, because they think more carefully. They resist the temptation to arrive at conclusions too quickly. They understand that complicated questions rarely have simple answers. And in a world obsessed with speed, that patience becomes a quiet superpower. French philosopher Blaise Pascal understood this centuries before smartphones existed. He famously wrote that many of humanity's problems arise from our inability to sit quietly alone in a room. At first, that sounds almost too simple. But think about your own life. How often do you experience complete silence? No notifications, no music, no videos, no conversations, no endless scrolling. Just you and your own thoughts. For many people, even a few minutes feels uncomfortable. The moment silence appears, they reach for a screen. Not because they need information, because they are trying to escape themselves. Yet silence performs an extraordinary function. It allows scattered thoughts to come together. Ideas that seemed unrelated suddenly begin connecting. Questions become clearer. Emotions become easier to understand. Solutions appear that constant activity could never reveal. Some of history's greatest discoveries did not happen during endless busyness. They happened during long walks, quiet mornings, lonely studies. Hours spent wrestling with difficult questions. The modern world teaches us to fear boredom. But boredom is often where deep thinking begins. When your mind stops being entertained, it finally begins creating. That is one reason genuine thinkers deliberately protect periods of uninterrupted attention. They understand that concentration is no longer ordinary. It has become a rare resource. And like every rare resource, it creates enormous value. But even this can be misunderstood. Because looking intelligent is not the same as becoming intelligent. Many people confuse performance with substance. They collect impressive vocabulary, they memorize quotations, They win arguments. They make sure everyone knows how much they have read. Yet beneath the surface, very little genuine thinking has taken place. True intelligence has never been about sounding impressive. It is about seeing clearly. It is the ability to recognize your own assumptions before criticizing someone else's. It is reading a book not to confirm what you already believe, but to discover what you have overlooked. It is becoming more interested in understanding than in winning. Perhaps that is why the wisest conversations often end without anyone claiming complete certainty. Both people leave having learned something. Both leave with better questions than they had before. And that may be one of the clearest signs of an intelligent mind, not possessing every answer, but continually improving the quality of its questions. But here's the important distinction. None of these habits require extraordinary talent. You don't have to be born a genius to question your assumptions. You don't need a perfect memory to think carefully. You don't need an exceptional IQ to become more curious. These are not gifts, they are decisions, and decisions become habits. Most people believe intelligence is measured by how quickly someone answers. But genuine intelligence often appears much slower. An intelligent person is comfortable saying, "I don't know. Let me think about that. I need more evidence." Those sentences sound ordinary, yet they reveal something extraordinary. They reveal a mind that values truth more than pride. That is why intellectual humility is so important. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is recognizing that reality is always larger than your current understanding of it. Every great thinker understood this. The more they learned, the more they realized how much remained unknown. Socrates became famous for saying that his wisdom came from knowing that he knew very little. Isaac Newton once compared himself to a child collecting shells on the seashore, while the great ocean of truth remained undiscovered before him. These were not insecure people. They were deeply intelligent people, and intelligence made them humble. Now compare that with the person who believes they already know enough. They stop reading. They stop listening. They stop asking questions. Their opinions become permanent. Their mind becomes closed, not because they lack intelligence, because they stopped choosing it. That is the real danger. The opposite of intelligence is not low IQ, it is intellectual complacency. It is reaching the point where you believe there is nothing left to learn. From that moment onward, growth quietly stops. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to defend yourself, instead of discovering something new. Every disagreement becomes a threat, instead of an invitation to think more deeply. Without realizing it, you become trapped inside your own certainty. This is why intelligence is not an achievement. It is a continuous practice. Every day presents the same decision. Will you read something that challenges you, or only something that comforts you? Will you ask another question, or settle for the first answer? Will you examine your own beliefs, or only criticize the beliefs of others? These choices appear small, almost invisible. But repeated over months and years, they create two completely different minds. One continues expanding, the other slowly becomes fixed. And the remarkable part is that neither outcome happens by accident. Both are built through repetition. Just as the body becomes stronger through repeated exercise, the mind becomes sharper through repeated thinking, not occasionally, daily. That is why Aristotle believed excellence is not a single act but a habit. The same is true of intelligence. It is not something you suddenly possess one morning. It is something you repeatedly practice until careful thinking becomes part of who you are. The person who becomes intelligent is rarely the person with the greatest natural advantage. It is usually the person who never stopped learning, who never stopped questioning, who never became comfortable with easy answers. Because intelligence has never been about having all the answers. It has always been about refusing to stop asking better questions. And here's the part most people never realize. You already have the ability to think this way. You don't need a different brain. You don't need to wait until you become smarter. The greatest thinkers in history were not born asking better questions. They trained themselves to ask them. Day after day, year after year. They read when it was easier to be entertained. They questioned when it was easier to agree. They admitted uncertainty when it was easier to pretend they knew. That is what separated them. Not talent, discipline. Every choice they made shaped the way they thought, and every thought shaped the person they became. The same opportunity exists for you. Every book you read, every assumption you challenge, every opinion you examine, every moment you choose understanding over comfort. You are strengthening your mind, slowly, almost invisibly, but undeniably. This is why intelligence is not something you own. It is something you do. It is a habit disguised as a talent. And every single day, you are either practicing it or neglecting it. Most people will hear these words, feel inspired for a moment, and then return to the same habits that keep them intellectually asleep. That is the easier path. But a few people will decide that from today they will think a little more carefully, read a little more deeply, question a little more honestly. Those small choices, repeated over years, create extraordinary minds, so perhaps the real question was never, am I intelligent enough? The real question has always been, am I willing to become more intelligent? Because that choice has always been yours.